Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this month's edition of Couch Coding, Terminus 1.0. Your experts for today, Josh Koenig, co-founder here at Pantheon, along with Greg Anderson, open source contributor, also here at Pantheon. Just a few housekeeping items to go over before we start. Please make sure you submit any questions you have during the presentation in the question window. We want to answer as many of your questions during the presentation as possible, so keep them coming. Also, this webinar will be recorded, and the recording will be made available to everyone next week. Now I'd like to turn it over to Josh and Greg.
Sweet, thank you. Let's just reposition our microphone. So, thanks for attending Couch Coding, and this has been a long time coming. Terminus 1.0, really excited to have the official release and a stable foundation for future greatness. So we're just going to go kind of end to end with this real quick. And then we'll have a chance to get into your questions and things you're interested in. So for anyone who's totally new to this, Terminus is the Pantheon command line. Anything you can do in the Pantheon dashboard, you can do with Terminus, and a whole lot more because you can script it. So to get started with Terminus, there's a one-line installer, assuming that you have a kind of a sane PHP environment in your local workstation. So Windows support is improving, but currently classified as beta. Just copy and paste this one-line installer. That'll install the command line tool. And then you have to authenticate with a machine token, which you generate via your dashboard. So like, here's my dashboard. I go to my account area, machine tokens. I've already got a bunch generated for various purposes, but I happen to have the string copied and pasted. So you'll get this from the interface when you generate a machine token. You give it a name. You go to your terminal. You say log in. And now you have this laptop is now going to be authenticated until that machine token is revoked. So this is the only time you'll ever have to provide any authentication to work from this workstation. And if you are putting machine tokens out into integration services and so forth, that's why you can have multiple of them. And so if you need to revoke one, you can, and then that machine token will no longer work to keep things secure. So Terminus auth. Who am I? Let's just make sure that I am logged in as who I think I am. Hey, there I am. It's my personal account on Pantheon. So what can you do with Terminus? Well, you can do kind of like the obvious stuff. So for instance, if I wanted to take a look at the list of sites that are there, I could say, hey, look, there's the sites that I have on Pantheon. If I was going to do something clever with this, maybe I would say I'd prefer that in format equals JSON. I could read that into something and do something else with it. There's actually a whole lot more data available. You'll notice that in the commands that I'm using here, I'm restricting the number of fields. If I actually wanted to get all the data, it would be a little bit more verbose, as you can see. And then, these IDs can be used to tie things together and so on and so forth. And the entire command list for Terminus, I'll just show Terminus Lists. So this is workflows are available, working with upstreams, managing your SSH keys, a whole lot of things that are particular to the site in terms of teams and so on and so forth. We've got issues around payment, organizations, New Relic, multi-dev, machine tokens, et cetera, et cetera. There's a whole lot you can do with Terminus. Like I said, everything that's available in the dashboard, and you can peruse this on your own time, or if you go to the manual, we have some great example usage that you can go through and kind of get into common use cases. But let's dig in. One of the things that I really like about Terminus is that it has a plugin architecture. And so we have a number of plugins, and the list of plugins is growing. And these allow us to kind of push the envelope in terms of what we do with Terminus. And in particular, kind of like developer, time saver, macros, or automation tools. So just an example of one that I have come to know and love and now feel that I cannot live without is the Filer plugin by Sean Dietrich. And what this does is it just automates or makes command line available the process of connecting a GUI SFTP client to a Pantheon development environment. So I would be able to do something like, let's say I'm working on my blog. That's here, right? Here's the blog itself. sandbox, that's the development environment, and I would just go Terminus site transmit. And that's going to go ahead, without me having to do any other work, it's going to open up my GUI client. It knows how to populate the right connection strings and so forth. And now I'm loading into the environment, the development environment for this site, which is great. Like, this is not something that's hard to do on its own, but it just takes a couple of minutes of copying, pasting things, and you might, make a mistake and have to go back and do it again. Having it as a one-liner is great. And then, of course, with your SFTP client, right, you can go in here and, let's see, what do we got? Actually, I have info.php that's restricted. That'd be an easy change to make. So here's info.php, just showing the core configuration, which is kind of safe to expose. But let's say I wanted to put more security around that. I could just grab this file, and let's just say instead of this, we would say echo hello couch coding. Right? And I like this because it makes it really easy to do things and make changes really quickly and debug in an environment. And so Terminus is like, just helping me get there where I want to be in my workflow much faster. And a lot of the plugins that are emerging are kind of similar in that sense. We have Pancakes, which is a similar thing for connecting SQL clients. There's rsync, which is for quickly copying files back and forth. That one Greg actually is the author of. Thank you, Greg. And of course, mass update, which is great. So like if you have a lot of sites that you're managing, you can get the upstream updates applied to a lot of them, and not without having to go through and do the individual workflows. You can just let Terminus chew through them for you, so on and so forth. One of the most simple example usages here is to apply upstream updates, which I can just show you really quickly since I happen to have some upstream updates available. The latest version of Drupal has not been applied to my blog, so I'm just going to toggle back into Git mode. I don't care particularly about the change that I made, and I will just go Terminus upstream updates apply outlandish -josh -dev. And in the dashboard, we'll actually see the workflow gets kicked off. I didn't do that with my mouse. Did it with the command line. And hopefully my window transparency, you can kind of see the spinner in the background, and they're going to complete at almost precisely the same time because they're keeping track of the same workflow that's operating on the platform. Yep, and we're done. Although the dashboard didn't update. Yeah, there we go. That's kind of the quick walkthrough of what you can do with Terminus. Greg, is there anything you think else we should cover before we get to more advanced usage?
Okay, we're ready to go on.
Okay, so the exciting stuff that we've all come here to see is we're going to go through some work that Greg has done to showcase how to use Terminus to set up a workflow that includes building sites with Composer, and there's even instructions here for using Terminus to set up Circle CI to automatically integrate and test pull requests and other changes to your website. So this is kind of like a really, I'd say fairly advanced workflow, but very powerful and something that I think is the future of website development. So this is a repo that you can feel free to check out, review, clone, contribute to, etc. It's called Example Drops 8 Composer, and we're going to be using Drupal 8 and Composer as the combination here. The same process can apply just as well to WordPress or even earlier versions of Drupal if you want to manage your website with a Composer JSON file as a manifest of all the things. There are good workflows for doing that with all the CMSs at this point, but since Drupal 8 kind of is built on top of Composer from the ground up. We're just using that as our example. So I'm just going to skip down here to the manual setup area, and we're going to go through and showcase this stuff. So let's do export site equals couch coding demo. And now I should be able to say, and there's no org here because I'm not in an organization. So this is going to create a fresh Drupal 8 site. And we're using the shell variable site just so I don't have to keep retyping couch-coding-demo over and over and over again. And if I were to go to my dashboard, we would probably already see the site popped up. It would be kind of still in its starting state, so there's not going to be anything we can do with it yet. But yep, we can see it's being created right there. It takes a minute or so to spin up a new site on Pantheon and to clone the Drupal repository. While we're kind of watching or waiting for the site to finish spinning up, do you want to talk about some of the what the process has been like to kind of come up with this repository and this example?
Oh yeah, it's been a very evolutionary process. It started off with the very simple need to manage Drupal sites using Composer on Pantheon. And as time has gone along, some of the Pantheon aces, like Steve Persh and Andrew Taylor, have made more full demos, and we've started taking some of these features and putting them into the example site. And what we'll be showing a little bit later is now this example will also do a full GitHub pull request workflow, and we'll show a demonstration of how to set that up with a minimum of effort.
Cool. That is very exciting. And there's also, there's a lot happening with Terminus development. We have a pretty, there's active work on more plugins, and we'll talk at that later on about how to develop your own plugin, because a plugin can be in some ways just as easy to create and potentially much easier to maintain versus a bash script. So you can have, again, kind of like meta or macro plugins that define a process. So if you have your own workflow that you want to follow when you roll out updates to a site, for instance, you could build a plugin to do exactly what you want and in the order that you want and so forth. And that might be more maintainable than just having it in a script, because you have all the power of Terminus at your hands in terms of output formatting, interaction with users if you want to get confirmation or other stuff like that. It's pretty nice. So this is done. And over here in the dashboard, because I was watching a site while it's spinning up, it's still in this state. But I believe if I were to, yeah, there we go. So now we got a Drupal 8 site. The next step is we're going to create a site repo. So using Composer, we're going to clone the example drops 8 Composer repository and sort of start a new project. And this is just running Composer on my workstation to basically instantiate a new project from the repo that we have up on GitHub.
This step is also a little bit slow, not quite as slow as creating the site. It's a little bit of waiting.
Because it's got to fetch all the packages and so forth.
Right.
I wonder, is there a way that this could give us the output of what it's doing, or does that?
It does eventually.
It does eventually.
It's quiet for a while, and then it starts.
It starts thinking, and then it starts down. Oh, there we go. Okay,
yeah.
Cool. All right. This is all the stuff you need to build Drupal 8, plus all the things that we've added for testing and management. All right. And
Getting some Drupal files.
yeah. Cool, we're done. All right, next step. Let's go into the directory that we just created. That's pretty obvious. Okay, and here we are. That's our directory. There's the setup that we've done based on that repo. So we're going to run prepare for Pantheon. What does this do, Greg, prepare for Pantheon?
Well, this example file sort of runs in two modes.
Mm-hmm.
One is, I mentioned earlier, the full Git PR workflow, where you just have the canonical site files only in your database. But of course, Pantheon is designed to serve everything from the Git repository, so it needs the fully baked project.
I see.
So prepare for Pantheon just changes your git ignore to say, I want everything in this project.
Got it. So it's just sort of like switching. Currently, our deployment process, when things get to Pantheon, we need every file, including the vendor, to be in version control.
Yeah, and this wouldn't be necessary if this was a single-purpose example. But right now I'm using it as a multi-purpose example.
All right.
So it's a little strange step in the middle.
So you're saying there is a way, though, that we can we're not showing it here, but there is a way that we can help people set up a workflow where they're running what I would call like a lean GitHub repository or a lean Bitbucket repository.
Yeah, we can show that later.
Okay, cool.
It's pretty easy to set up.
Awesome.
With Terminus.
All right, so here we go. So now I'm just using Git locally to initialize this project. I can do this myself. Git add -a. That'll take a minute because it's got to add a lot of files to the repo because we are including the vendor here, which is going to have a lot of files in it.
Not as slow as the create project.
Not as
still takes a little
still
bit of
takes
time.
a minute. All right. One thing just to, well, I guess we'll get there later. I'm just because we're showing it. All right, and then we got to commit. So git commit -m initial build out, including vendor directory.
Now we're going to get back to some Terminus use to get our Pantheon site set up as our new upstream, our new origin.
Right. So Git is doing a fair bit of work here, I believe, as well. There it goes. Okay, so now we're going to say, oh, this is going to change the connection mode to Git so I can push to the repo.
You might already be there, but it depends on your upstream.
Right, so we don't want... this is kind of fancy. We're doing a little bit of magic.
Yeah, you might want to echo that variable after you set it to show what's going on.
Right, so now it's in. So because I'm on Mac here, I'm going to do export. So this is going to say... we're going to get a variable called Pantheon repo, and we're going to get it from Terminus by asking what the full Git URL is. We could copy and paste it from the dashboard, but since the whole point of this is we're doing Terminus, so let's actually get that out. So echo Pantheon repo. Hey, there we go. That looks right. All right, next. Oh, I see. Now we're going to add it as the origin to the repo that we just initialized. And we're going to force push. So we're going to overwrite all the stuff that's in the default site that we just set up with this this data, which will kind of step on the other stuff that's there.
With this workflow, you ignore your upstream and use the Terminus Composer plugin to update your site.
Got it. So this is going to push everything to Pantheon. Moving right along. Set my phone to do not disturb. All right. Cool. Next, we're gonna use Drush via Terminus, right? So this is one of the other great. Oh, cool. Can changes to Pantheon YAML detected.
Yeah, this example sets up the relocated document root, so your site is in the web directory instead of at the repository root.
Oh, right.
That's a lot better for Composer.
Yeah, that makes things better for Composer. And a lot of people like to do that if, for instance, they want to have some files in their repository that they don't ever want exposed on the web, and they want to, rather than using a private files directory, it's actually like not something that's relevant to a web, like test files, or somebody will keep like vagrant specification along with the project, and the relocated doc route allows you to do that pretty easily. It's just finishing up now. The get transaction is finishing. I'm just going to quickly actually pop open a second tab here so we can take a look at that Pantheon YAML, because I think that's a interesting thing that people might not be aware of. So this is web doc root equals true, and what that means is the actual files for the website are now in a directory called web, not in the root of the repository. So if you look in web, that's like where your index.php is and all your other stuff. So this gives you the flexibility to run projects like that if you're interested. So back to our main window. We're done. We force pushed. Let's actually just take a look here on the dashboard, and as you can see, that first commit is gone, and we are now just using initial build out, including. Oh wow, I can't spell. Awesome. So next, view site. Great. So I did that myself.
Did you run the site install?
Oh, I did not run the site install.
No,
No, I did not run the site install. So this is another really important use for Terminus. So Drupal has Drush, and also now Drupal console, which there's a plugin for, and WordPress has WP-CLI. These are the command line interfaces to the CMSs themselves, which are super valuable for all sorts of things. And Terminus is the conduit by which you can invoke those command lines on the Pantheon platform. So what we're doing here is installing, so we'll go couch coding demo site. And this is going to use Drush to, great, it's just reminding me that it's in read-only mode. I'm fine with that. Will it fail to?
It might.
Let's see. Live demo.
Actually, I think I ran through this, so it must work.
Yeah. It may be that it just knows how to set the profile. This is like.
I actually think I pre-populated the profile, the standard here, so that we can do that.
Okay.
Remembering now. This is a real live demo.
Right. So this is running the Drupal installer, but via the command line to set up the site. And once again, on this site here. And it looks like it's done. Congratulations, you installed Drupal. So now if I load the site, it should work.
Yep.
All right, so let's check it out.
Warming caches.
Yep, there we go. Welcome to the Couch Coding demo site. And since I installed with this, I'm going to kind of go off script for a second. Since I installed this with the command line, I don't actually know how to log in, but I don't need to, because the beauty of this is that you don't actually ever, this is something that I find super useful about the command line tools. And we actually sponsored the development of an equivalent plugin for WP-CLI. I think one of my favorite Drush commands is the ULI command, which is for user login link.
User login.
User login. So basically, the syntax you use here when you're working on Pantheon with Terminus is you call Terminus, that's the utility, Drush, that's the command. You get the environment that you're targeting, and then you do 2 dashes to say, after this, the Drush command. And then Terminus essentially stops trying to interpret anything you've said after that, and will pass the rest of it through to Drush. So if you have complicated arguments like we had before where there's quotes and so forth, you don't have to get into that whole game of like multiply backslashing and escaping stuff. So just ULI generates the one-time login link, and this gives me a URL that I can load, and I can go here, and now I'm logged in as an admin, as user number 1, the super user, on this website. So this is like super useful for development purposes. One of my least favorite things is when you are passing around like user auth credentials, or you have one often poorly secured password that or account that you use on multiple sites that you share with people. That's kind of not the way it should be, and these disposable one-time login links make it so that like you never even need to know the password to the website, but you can, as a developer, get access to it when necessary. So that's just like another thing that Drush makes possible. WP CLI with the one-time login link plugin makes possible. I'll just quickly actually show that as part of runcommand.io, Daniel's work, and one-time login. So this is like a great, if you want that same functionality for WordPress, you can get it really easily this way. And again, just great development practice, kind of simplifies things for debugging and users, and something I encourage. And Terminus lets you do that on Pantheon. So at this point, we've gone through the manual setup, and what should we do next?
I think we should fire off the one command setup to do everything we just did in a single command and more.
Okay. So what's the? Give me the command
It's at the scroll to the top of this README here.
Okay.
Where it says Quick Start.
Quick start. Quick start.
Yeah, a little bit lower, below
Sorry.
credentials. Have you set up your credentials?
I have not.
Oh darn.
That's fine. We can get there.
Yeah. Okay, so the links above there for GitHub, Pantheon, and CircleCI. If you need to make new credentials, just hop over to those three links.
Great.
And do that and make yourself a little script.
Cool. So I'm going to go here.
The script is just for convenience. If you want to do it again and again, all you really need to do is export those variables.
Yeah. I'll make the script. That's easy enough. But I'm just thinking about where I want to make it. I don't want to make it in the project.
No.
Let's go edit couch creds.sh. And now I will go to GitHub. Pantheon I've already got. I had that over here. So that's my machine token that I'm using. I'm going to, like, if I were really going to be really, I could set up a separate machine token for the example so that if it, got out of hand, I could revoke it. But I already made this one for couch coding, so I'm just going to reuse it for convenience sake. So that's our Terminus token. And then I need a GitHub token, which I already have one that I might, I can't see it again. That's GitHub being nice. So creating a token, right.
Is there a link to your personal access tokens? Just go to your user settings. And there you go.
This is just still more in the docs. If I just go to GitHub.
Just go to your GitHub dashboard page. And
go to settings.
And near the bottom.
Personal access tokens.
Yeah, that's the one.
Generate new token. Thank you, GitHub. Password manager. GitHub. Copy. Paste. Okay, this is, we'll give it repo access, and this is couch coding. And copied that to the clipboard. That's this one. And then circle. I've actually never generated a circle token before. So this will be a new one for me.
That's pretty easy.
Pretty easy. Oh, wow. It's just that easy.
See where it says account dashboard?
Yeah.
Click on that link.
Okay. Oh.
Yeah, and then just click create and name it.
I love it when they have deep links to these things. Okay. So this is our token, and we put this here. Okay. Cool. So I'm saving that, and then I would just do
source it.
Source it. Good. Yeah. So source couch creds. Cool.
There.
Great.
Now you can just run one command, and it'll do all the things.
Doing all the things. All right. And
oh, it wasn't polite enough.
That's all right.
Click on the link, and you'll find it.
Which one?
Click on the thing where it says updated README. It just scrolled off the bottom of your screen. Updated README. Click on it. And then there's
build and create project.
That's it.
Okay.
And then you want to rename example site to something.
Okay, so this is like couch coding full auto.
Yeah, and that D8 is actually an alias. It
Uh-huh.
means Pantheon Systems example drops 8
Got it.
composer.
Got it. So this is going to go back over the things that we had set up before, but then what's it going to do beyond that?
Well, this does everything we just did, all in one command, and it does a lot more too. It's going to go and it's going to make a copy of the example site in GitHub, and it'll make a new GitHub repository for you.
Right, because I gave it my GitHub token, so it can do GitHub things for me.
Absolutely. So you're going to end up with a brand new canonical repository that only contains your sources, none of Drupal sources,
Okay.
on GitHub. And that's where you're going to do all of your future development. Now, in order to get this on Pantheon, this workflow uses Circle CI to do the build step and then push the build results to Pantheon.
Got it.
So Pantheon repository will hold the build results, and the repository in Pantheon you'll only use like a scratch workspace because it's rebuilt every single time. So what this script is doing right now is after it sets up the GitHub repository, it also creates the site on Pantheon, and it sets up a Circle repository. And what it's doing right now is it just made a public-private key pair for use specifically by this integration.
Okay.
And using the credentials you provided it, it's automatically putting the private key on Circle and the public key on Pantheon. So now Circle is going to be able to use those credentials to push your code up to Pantheon.
So now, so here it is. I can see it creating the site, couch coding full auto, but you said it also made an SSH key for me? Oh, there we are. Yeah.
It also added an SSH key for you that's unique for this one.
Got it.
So you can, revoke that later if you stop using this integration.
Yeah, and it tells me what the key fingerprint is. Great.
But it actually gets even more wild than that.
Okay.
Because this example repository also has some behat tests that are pre-populated in the example. And the way we did it before, where everything was on Pantheon, those behat tests weren't super useful. You could run them locally, but that was it. But with this Pantheon GitHub PR workflow, every time you make a new pull request against your canonical GitHub repository that this script created for you, it's going to fire off a new set of tests on Circle. And those Circle tests are going to build your Pantheon site, or build your Drupal site with all of the things that Pantheon needs. It's going to make a new multi-dev environment on Pantheon and push those build results over to the new multi-dev. It's going to run all of the behat tests on that new multi-dev. And that multi-dev is going to persist. So if you want to go and take a look at what the effects of your pull request are on your site, you can go and play with that multi-dev environment all you want. Then, when you're satisfied with the results, you just go back to GitHub and you merge the pull request back into master, just as you always would.
Right.
That's going to fire off another test on Circle, but at this point, Circle's going to see that it's doing a test on master. And it's going to realize that it's done with that pull request. So it's going to go and get rid of the multi-dev environment on Pantheon, and it's also going to take your build results and push it back to the dev environment on Pantheon. So now that that pull request is done, you have your dev environment all ready to go, and you can promote that to test and live following the normal Pantheon dev test live workflow. We've just added pull requests as a new step on top of that. But it actually gets even wilder than that, because at Pantheon...
Wait, it gets wilder than that?
It gets even wilder than that. Because at Pantheon, we have this wonderful feature called on-server development.
Okay.
And on-server development, people have been using this for a long time, and you just showed it at the beginning of this demo. You could just flip into SFTP mode and make some changes. If you do this to one of the multi-dev environments that was created for a pull request from your canonical repository, and then you go to your dashboard and commit those changes, this example project has Quicksilver hooks for the code commit step. And it's going to see that commit come in. It's going to take only the parts of your changes that are to the canonical repository. It's going to push them back to GitHub. And then from there, GitHub is going to take over. It's going to do what GitHub always does. It's going to take those commits, see that they're part of an existing pull request. It's going to fire off another test with Circle. The Circle is going to round trip that. It's going to push the new results back to the same development environment. And so if you had changes to your build sources, then the build will happen again, and you'll get the new build results on your PR workflow.
So as long as you're, because the only, you wouldn't want to do on-server development for anything that was in vendor or that was a build artifact, right?
Yeah.
That would not be normal.
Right, and the way that works is that this example project just has all of the build results get ignored. So if you did go ahead and change those in on-server development, you would, for a short period of time, see those changes take effect. But as soon as Circle came and made the new build, it would overwrite your changes to the build results.
Got it.
So,
but it does this workflow then. If you were like debugging something in like some custom code or your theme or whatever, and you wanted to debug it on Pantheon, and you made that commit, in the dashboard, the way that I just showed at the beginning, like with the example PHP file, that could then get pushed back up to the now canonical GitHub repository that would remain the lean repository.
Yeah, that's right. And this is a really powerful workflow because it allows multiple people to collaborate together and operate only on their canonical sources and have everything just come out exactly the way it's supposed to.
Yeah.
But you can also use the great feature on GitHub, where GitHub will allow you to edit files right in your browser.
Yeah.
And if you create a pull request from that, you don't need to know anything about Git or Pantheon at all. If one of the other people at your company has set this up all for you, just go on to GitHub, make a change, create a pull request from it, and boom, everything will show up live.
So if I was working, so hopefully like this is going to take a minute because it's going through and building all these things up. Should I be worried about this? It would warn me that there's a submodule, and we don't support submodules on the platform.
Interesting. Yeah, I have to look into that. It should have removed all of that stuff. It shouldn't matter. Sometimes Composer will go and add a Git directory if you've selected a non-production version. But I ran through this before, and the site works.
Okay.
So usually the biggest problem with that submodule warning is if Git sees a .git directory, it assumes it's a submodule. It doesn't add anything.
Okay.
And not just the Git directory is ignored, but the entire contents of that folder doesn't end up on your site, which generally has, a bad result because you expect those files to be delivered.
Cool. So now we're at the point where it's installing Drupal.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, you can go to GitHub and you can see your site created for you.
So here's, on my GitHub profile, there's the couch coding full auto. Okay, so, all right.
And
so
scroll
this is
down
here.
and look at the README, because the README is kind of cool. It's very short, but it has a link to your Circle tests and to your Pantheon dashboard and to the site. Once it's installed, you can click on that site and it'll give you your Drupal site.
So if I go here, I don't even need to like...
It depends on how far it's advanced in the build step. But it hasn't yet configured Circle, so you don't see any builds at all.
Okay.
But later, when you click on that link, you should see you're running tests.
So now it's configuring Circle CI.
Yeah, so this is pretty fast. So pretty soon you should be able to click on that again and see that your test is running.
And this is, okay, so it's just like configuring Circle CI for me. Oh, and it's done. It looks like everything is finished.
Yeah, it should be good. If you're really brave, just click on that site link and see if it came up, or if it all caught fire because of that Git submodule, then we'll have to go back and fix that.
That's what you get for last time.
Yeah, I mean, last
warming
time
up the caches.
Hey, there you go.
All right.
It all worked. You've got a site.
Okay. So let's get that open in another window. Let's get the Pantheon dashboard open here. And then if I do this, Circle CI should be set up.
It should be running right now. The test
it's going to run, and it's going to run, basically it's going to run the tests on the first commit. Yeah, so it's running the tests now.
And these tests take about 16 minutes, the base tests. But eventually they'll come back green, and you'll be all ready to start on with a new pull request. But you don't have to wait for your pull requests tests finish before you can see your multi-dev site. Because
Because it'll do it
Yeah,
automatically?
it does that on the first step. It makes the multi-dev site to run the tests against. So while the tests are running, you can see your multi-dev
Okay,
site
so if
there.
I were to, let's just do something super trivial. Like, again, I'll go to the web, and I will create a new file, and I'll call it hello.php,
Yep.
and we'll say hello world, right?
Yep, that looks
seems
great.
good. And this
Make a pull
is,
request
let's
out
make
of that.
make a new branch out of that. Hello, and we'll call hello world. Propose the new file, and now it's saying the hello world example. Okay.
Yep, and
Create
you have
the
to
pull request.
save this before anything will happen, but
Okay.
now
So now,
click on that details next to Circle CI and you should see another test starting.
okay. Yep. Build number 2, starting the build.
Yep, you have to wait a little while because you will see
Right.
as it goes along, it's going to be using Terminus and the Terminus build env plugin
Okay.
to set up these new multi-dev environments. And all of the credentials, it's actually quite an involved process to do this by hand with all of these 3 different components having credentials for each other
Yeah.
to do this communication. But that was all set up automatically
At the
with
beginning.
this Quicksilver
Yeah.
script.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
hopefully all of the people on mute are like freaking out right now.
Well, this is one of the things that we've talked about being a holy grail in terms of workflow. So this is still configuring the stuff on Circle.
Yep.
So it's booting there. But now we're getting our tokens.
It's getting pretty close to
It's getting
the
pretty close to setting
fun
it up.
build steps.
Right.
Loading in some of the things that it needs for it loads the Terminus plugins that it uses and Terminus itself.
Yep.
And this useful little tool called CGR, which stands for Composer Global Require. If you're ever out on the internet and you see some instructions that say use Composer Global Require to install this tool, ignore those instructions. They're evil and poisonous. You should instead install the CGR tool, just like this demo is doing, and install with that. It fixes everything up.
Fixes all the things.
Yep. Here's Composer installing your site.
Terminus version check. So setting up Drush, making a Terminus plugin directory, grabbing the build tools plugin, and the second, so subsequently, Circles gets faster at this because it starts caching the results of these
That's
builds
right.
as well. So,
It is a little fast for
Yeah.
a second.
so now it's using the machine token that I gave it to log in, and so Circle is now working as me, basically via my machine token. And it looks like it is now running a command called build env. Oh, okay, so it's like
doing some
trying to
cleanup.
doing some cleanup, although there's nothing to be cleaned up. But this would be normally actually starting the cleanup process in case there were a bunch of other environments hanging around. And
Sort of looks like it's doing the build
right,
step now and
it's making
filling
sure
out
the
all of
development environment is awake. And now it's creating an
Creating the
environment,
multi-dev.
creating multi-dev. And if we actually go here to multi-dev, oh, there it is, testing, creating the CI1 multi-dev environment.
Oh, hit reload. I think that's the CI1 is from when it tested.
Oh, from the first
commit.
It's testing. That's how it's. Oh, so it's actually not testing on the dev environment from the first commit. It's testing from the. It creates a multi-dev environment to run the Behat tests the first time.
That's right.
Okay.
It doesn't touch your dev environment unless the tests pass.
Got it. Okay. So. Oh, I see. Here. Now it's creating the. It had to get to this step.
Yeah, and it named it PR Hello.
Okay.
That's how you can tell the difference between your tests against master, which all start CI dash, and the ones against pull requests all start PR dash.
Okay. Cool.
And
So this will
it
show
does
up
that
here
by
in a
convention
moment.
to help itself figure out how to clean up these different environments, which have slightly different rules to them.
Cool. Oops. Back over here. Yep, there it goes. PR hello.
And actually, before you can actually see the site, you have to wait for the tests to run for a little while, because the way it's set up right now is it uses Behat to step through the Drupal GUI installer to install the site, which is a stronger test. But I'm going to switch that to the faster test of using Drush site install.
Yeah.
So that'll cut the time down a little bit. And,
oh, looks like we had a failure.
Successfully queued. Why is it red?
Huh. Well,
Exit code 1.
yeah.
Error success.
Right.
That's the strangest error message I've ever seen.
Yeah, we'll have to dig back into that. So this still working. Build assets for PR hello. So my question is, we got stopped short of running the tests, but my question is, does this have my hello.php on it?
Oh, it should be there by now. That part, as long as it pushed the code,
Right.
which it did before it created the multi-dev environment, you
Right.
should be able to pull up that page.
Hello
There you
world.
go. All right, success.
So, and then back here on my, go back to my GitHub repo, couch coding full auto, and I go to my pull requests. I've got my hello world example. It's showing me that there was that the test failed. Yeah, and we could have something actually come back in. If for instance, if we could probably expand this a little bit more, if I gave the GitHub token like comment access, we could have it post back a comment with a link to the environment to test the things.
It already does that, although it may or may not do that because of the test failure at this point.
I see. That normally comes through.
If everything was working, you would then see a link to your multi-dev environment dashboard and also a link to the site itself.
That's awesome. So then, kind of like tests passed, now ready for human review.
Yeah.
Code review and human website review.
Yeah. Oh, and Steve first slacked me to say that error message means something went wrong to the multi-dev creation. So I'm wondering if that site has the ability to create multi-devs. I mean, it's got some, so it must.
Should.
But I'm not sure why.
Yeah.
It errored out there.
We'll have to debug that. Well, so I think at this point we should stop our couch coding and open things up for questions. And it looks like we might have a few.
We do. We're going to start with one that we got actually before the session started, and that is we got hit by the recent content injection vulnerability because we updated a week after the latest security patch dropped. We'd like to tighten that window up and are exploring automatically applying the latest security patches to our dev instances and running some tests so we know that nothing is broken before pushing the updates to production. Would Terminus help enable us to do this? If so, how?
Yes. So you're in luck. So the vulnerability that the questioner is referencing is a recent WordPress security vulnerability that's been in the news a bit. And I'm going to try to, on the fly, find Andrew Taylor's repo. Is it under his name or under Pantheon Systems?
Yeah, it's under his name. Let's see. I've got it here.
It's A. Taylor or A. Taylor 1?
Yeah, something like
No,
that.
that's not him. A. Taylor me.
Yeah.
He's on vacation this week. Well-deserved vacation, I should add. But he has a repo. So there, here we have our one of the cool things we did at Pantheon was we built a WordPress site that just has a lot of information on like scalability, scalewp.io, which you can see here. It's got lots of information on it, but it is actually maintained in a similar way. I think he was sort of a forerunner for the workflow that we're showing, and he has a WordPress at scale auto update repo, which is describing how it actually does exactly this process. And there is a really interesting challenge that we've been talking about internally as to how could we, when there's a really timely update, like could we run a lightweight service for people so that we could auto-generate pull requests with security updates when it's urgent, or ping something so that to kick off a build when these things happen. Because I believe this is actually just running nightly at the moment, which is still pretty good. Like it's better nightly than weekly. But this repo shows everything you would need to actually do an auto update. And then he also has a another one called Advanced WordPress on Pantheon, which has a number of other cool build
Slack
processes,
integration.
Slack integration, and other stuff like that. So Terminus is absolutely enables this type of automatic security updating, which is certainly something that I think a lot of people are interested in, and we're very interested in supporting. So check that out and let us know if you have more questions or need help getting it rolling for your projects.
Right, next question is, I'm not as familiar with Composer, but are you using it here to pull in packages you commonly use in your Drupal instance?
Yes. So maybe you should explain how that works, Greg.
Yeah, so in a way, Composer is a little bit like the old drush make process, but it's a lot better at being able to recursively handle dependencies. That's why it's called a dependency manager. Drupal.org now has something called a Composer packagist repository. So with just a little bit of work to your Composer JSON, you can then use Composer require to pull in the code from any module that you want to use. And that's what's happening in this example project that we showed earlier in this demo. It's all set up for bringing in modules from Drupal.org.
And Drupal core itself, right?
And Drupal core itself.
Right, so like this is the really cool thing about the way that this script set up the project is, here's my repo on GitHub. There's a Composer JSON that tells me about needing, well, we're using Dropstate Composer, but this is how we install Drupal core. But if I go into this web directory, like these are all empty, right? We're not actually keeping, like none of the stuff is here. Like these are just places where you could put custom code if you needed to, but none of the Drupal core files are actually being tracked in this repository. They're being built on the fly by Composer. And if we wanted to add contributed modules or an open source theme or something, we could use the same mechanism for doing that. And you'd have a composer.json file that is the manifest of all the things that you're fetching from the wider internet that are maintained elsewhere for this project. And then your custom code is just is the only thing that's unique to the repo. And then that's what we see in these commits where it says build asset for, oh, I'm not even going to try to load this because it's all the files. Build assets for CI1 is like the commit that added all of Drupal core and then pushed it to Pantheon so we could run the website here.
Yeah, and of course you can use all of the things we've been showing you with Terminus. You can do that without using Composer, but for scripting, it makes your whole process a lot better if you go in with Composer and use a build step. So you do need to use Composer if you want to use the PR workflow that we demoed, but the other techniques work just as well without Composer.
Yeah, cool. Next question?
All right. If Terminus is really slow, we are an agency with lots of sites. Is there anything we can do to speed up our responses from Terminus?
So there's a performance improvement coming out real soon. We have a sort of a 1.0.1 release that will happen probably before the end of the month, and that's going to have some improved Windows installation support and there's a bunch of and there's some nice things for plugin developers that we'll get to, but it does include a performance improvement that'll essentially shave 1 to 3 seconds off of every command. But Terminus is talking to Pantheon, so when you are doing something like creating a site, it happens at the speed of Pantheon. And I will guarantee that we will forever strive to improve the speed of the platform itself, but that's kind of out of Terminus's hands. Like it can't make the platform create a multi-dev environment any faster, although eventually we will make all those things faster, but that'll benefit everybody, not just Terminus users.
Alrighty. Our next question is, are basic tests in Circle CI set up already, or is that something done manually?
So this repo includes some really basic tests, and it's mainly there just to like they're the equivalent of a sanity check, if you will, I think. And then let's look. There we go. Run bhat. So what are they doing? These basic tests are saying, can I install Drupal 8? And given that I enter these things and I hit save and continue, then I should see no front page content, and then it's going to create a page and make sure that those pages exist and so on and so forth. These are like really like basic sanity check type tests, but they're included because number one, if these don't work, you can bet, it's a pretty safe bet that nothing else does either and something's really wrong. And you can just take these tests as a starting place to start iterating and developing your own. I would say in general with behavioral testing, which is the BHAT model, don't try to cover everything. The gestalt of behavioral testing is to kind of like trace the critical path, the most important thing that users need to do, and make sure that that is actually tested end to end. And what you'll discover is that by testing a critical path end to end, you're in effect, you're testing every system that is dependent on, that has a dependency on the critical path. So you're actually testing a much wider area, and then you don't end up trying to maintain like an unsustainable number of different behavioral tests. So what I would recommend if you're new to this would be start with this example, but then take over. Like you probably don't even need these tests for your website because they're not very useful in a real world case, but focus on the one critical path end-to-end test that is the most important thing that people can do on your website, and test that.
All right, we're going to run through a couple more questions here. The next one is, can you create and then install a site with a custom upstream using Terminus?
That's a built-in command.
That's a built-in command. So if I did Terminus list pipe grep, well, pipe grepping never hurt anybody. It's Upstream.
The site colon create is what they're asking
Oh,
for.
I got it. Okay, so help site create. We need to get
Upstream colon list is also a very useful command in this instance because you don't know what parameter to provide for
right.
Upstream ID, but you can find that out with Upstream colon list.
List fields equals name.
It's called long name.
Long name.
And framework.
Again, by default, Terminus is super verbose, but basically this gives you all the upstreams that are available. And like, so for instance, those of you who might be members of organizations, like if you work at a university and you have a private upstream, or if you're an agency and you maintain your own upstreams, Terminus knows what organizations you're a part of, and that those will be available in the same way. You'll see them in the list for you, but obviously they're not available for anyone else.
Right. Next question.
Yep.
All right. How often / under what circumstances do you go through the full CI process you demoed?
So we were going through the process of setting it up, which does take a bit of time. But once it's set up, that should just be happening automatically. The point is that you will do some work as a developer. You will put your work into a pull request, and then you'll basically say, okay, I'm good. My pull request is out there. Tests are running. I'm going to get a colleague of mine to review my code, which is not something that that's a level of introspection that a robot can't do for you. But within the next 10 to 15 minutes, you should have feedback from an automated system that tells you whether anything is broken, so you can focus on that quickly. And then your colleague can review your code and also have access to that multi-dev environment. To review the environment, maybe do some manual QA, maybe you show it to your client or your boss to get their sign-off before it deploys. And I'd say it's really, it's a matter of taste as to when you go through that process versus just deploying something. Generally speaking, like if you're using an agile process and you have sprints, you'll want to have a pull request, at least a pull request for each story that you're doing. If you're working in a little bit more of an informal process because it's just not that big of a deal, I would say think about anything that you would want to show a stakeholder before you deploy it to production should go through that process. And then if you're automating security updates, clearly you'd go through that process because you'd want the automated tests to tell you that the security update didn't break anything before rolling it out.
All right, I'm going to sneak one more question here from our friend Weston. That is there a limit to the number of multi-dev environments we can create for a site? Thinking about if we created BHAT tests for separate WordPress plugins, I'd want to be able to isolate them on a separate environment and not worry about tests for different plugins competing for the same environments.
There are limits, although if you have a good reason, we can support this. You really have to adjust those upwards. I think the default limit is 10
yes.
concurrent multi-dev environments. And if you were thinking about using this for plugin testing as a general purpose thing, we have Daniel Bachhuber did some interesting work to test WordPress core on Pantheon that uses kind of some similar tooling. We probably should rope that in and get that in our examples as well. The other thing you can do is you can just create new sites. like if you're going to have if you're going to be testing things that are meant to be isolated from one another, you could create, and they're going to be spinning up vanilla sites, adding plugins, and running through tests. You could use different sites for that as well as a workaround. So if you want to have and then you never have to worry about them competing. We do have some of our customers who work on very large websites that have really large databases, which mean it can take a long time to create a multi-dev environment because that data just has mass and it takes time to copy. There's a workflow that they use, which maybe we could get them to talk about in the future, where they sort of pre-bake a set of multi-dev environments and then they shuffle them around. And so that cuts a lot of time out of their workflow. And that could be something if you're looking to speed up your test process. You could do as well, where rather than trying to create a multi-dev environment from scratch every time, you could use a kind of a pre-baked one and just prep it before the tests go down.
Alrighty, guys. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. Since we didn't get to all your questions, you can always join us at our Pantheon office hours. That's at pantheon.io/agencies/office-hours. We hold these every Wednesday and Thursday. So if there are any questions you still want to ask, you can join us there. Thank you all so much for watching. If you have any additional questions or feedback, please visit our website where you'll find a contact us page and we'll put you in touch with the best member of our team. Thank you all for joining us.
And our users. Yeah, and I'll say I actually have to run because I'm doing working with the CSE at ACE Group this afternoon. But Greg, do you have time to maybe hang out in Power Users to talk if people want to chat about some of this stuff?
Yeah, totally.
Okay, so yeah, if you want to jump into the Power Users Slack, which if you don't know about it, I will put up on the screen right now.
There's a Terminus channel.
We should just use the main. So yeah, so the Power Users group, there's a Slack instance. You can get into it. In fact, I will just boot that up and you can see it. And Greg will be there starting as soon as we move out of this conference room that we're getting kicked out of. And then y'all can chat more there. And I think if there's a lot of interest in this type of stuff, we can set up some kind of follow-up, maybe with some of there's other people. I'm demoing a lot of this stuff. I can't take any credit for it. Greg, Steve, Andrew, and the Alchemy squad here at Pantheon that built the new version of Terminus should deserve all the credit. And honestly, they're the folks you want to talk to more so than me. I can answer most questions, but they know for real. So we'll take it to the Power Users channel if there are more discussion wants to happen.
Thank you, guys. Thanks, Josh. Thanks, Greg. Have a good one, everyone.